The following session is a psychic reading conducted by Mrs. Irva Peterson with the sensitive Ross Peterson at Laughing Gull Point, Garden, Michigan. Please clear the mind and inform us when the mind is clear.
The mind is clear.
Dear Lord, please protect this entity from all negative influences, regardless of source, and give us the answers we seek of this inquiring mind through the manifestation of truth, intelligence, and love. Amen. Would you please allow your mind to go to whom, to where, to what, and to when it is directed? The questions we have all basically pertain to death and life after death, and are designed to be available to the general public in aiding the greatest number of people toward the furthering of their soul development. Please adapt your answers to the fulfillment of this objective and phrase your answers to the comprehension level of the layman rather than to only the specialist.
What is death as we know it?
Death is birth, as ye know it. However, there are aspects here that should be touched upon that would be helpful to all. For death in one dimension is birth in another, and the process is usually endless unless the entity elects to attain the aspect of the Christ love and breaks the chain. For you see, the soul that would hover over that of the female form, waiting the emerging of that of the infant in order for it to inhabit it, does lose awareness of that it has been in the dimension that it has left. In this aspect, the soul temporarily losing consciousness could be decreed death. And yet it is actually a birth, is it not? Now, that entity and that soul inhabits that vehicle, that temple, that body, for those span of years that it is entitled to. Then death occurs. Death of what? The physical body? Yea, easily. And must be experienced by all in one fashion or another. But of course, consciousness does continue to live and enter other dimensions. For the soul can easily shed this house of clay as it has shed for most countless other houses of clay in that of the physical, you see. Now, most fear death. And this is foolish and witless indeed. For most would regard death as a gray, skeletal-like figure, draped in a hood, surrounded by the dankness and the mold and the fog and the mist and those things that are of decaying. In actuality, this is far from the truth, for death should be regarded more as the rosy-cheeked cherub. And this, of course, is depending upon how death is experienced. For death of the physical body is an individual thing. It is a very personal thing. It is different for every entity. There are some universal aspects that we can touch upon. But again, death is experienced as an end result of thousands of experiences leading up to the point of physical death, you see. Now, it would be best to understand some functions of consciousness or the mind in relation to the soul and the harmony or disharmony that can be created between that of soul mind and of physical body. Now, if that entity in the physical is that one who would seek all aspects of expression of love, if that entity is one who would diligently practice entering the Holy of Holies as of meditation. If that entity is one who has made a serious study of the language of the soul, of that of the dream, then the entity will be aware that in certain aspects of the dream, in certain aspects of meditation, and in certain aspects of natural sleep, this is what is termed the shadow of death. For you see, the consciousness is laid aside, the physical body is operating almost automatically, and yet these consciousnesses go to other dimension in the state of natural sleep, or in that is induced as a form of increasing thy God awareness. For those who have prepared their own path, then the transition of shedding this physical body is not one that is too disruptive, for the entity is fully aware of the continuation of consciousness. And for this one there is a very short interim of time as far as awareness or awakening is concerned. Usually, if there are those who would help these souls to cross over, so to speak, would pray for their further learning, their further involvement, rather than weep tears of self-pity and grief, then that soul could usually pass over within that of the 8th day. There are some that are enlightened to the extent that the soul could traverse from one dimension to another with little difficulty, and the transition is almost instantaneous. Look to that who are known as the masters, but most especially that one ye know best as of Jesus. For this was an entity that understood all dimensions of God, and the transition was so complete that the entity took the physical body with him, leaving no record on that of the earth to be besmirched by those in that of the form of thought. This is that is shown in the resurrection, see. Now all can learn to do this if they would emulate that has been done by he who was the master of masters. However, most do not. There are many who doubt in their mind the continuation of consciousness. And as such, they would spend what man might call a great deal of time in what would call the gray night of the soul. Others would call it the lost soul. Others would say that they are in limbo. Those who are of the Catholic faith would speak of it as purgatory. For these are not places, but states of mind. And what it is simply saying is that the entity has shed the physical body and there is confusion. There is a loss of awareness. And the entity finds itself enveloped in the mists and knows not where it is and seeks here and there and goes hither and yon, but most of all continues to want to return to the dimension that it left, the physical life. For many a soul hovers around the geographical and physical area where the demise did occur. This is what some might call the ghost, you see. Some are so enamored of that of the earth that they never look what you might call upward. For there are always those that would help thee, those thy angels, if you would call it, those that have passed on before. And there are many with specific duties that would help these lost souls, these wandering souls, to cross over, to look for the shaft of light that they will most surely witness if they would gaze upward. And as they witness the shaft of light, physically they are drawn towards it, you see. With this comes knowledge, enlightenment, and awareness that entering in of other dimensions. In this way, birth is experienced. Now, Birth as a babe? Nay. The birth into this dimension will usually enable that soul to take on the garb of that is held in its mind the longest period of time. Now, ye would find many that would speak of heaven, and many that would speak of hell. But know ye this, that ye live in the physical, if it is heaven, is the same thing that is lived once the physical body is laid aside. But of those who are blind unto themselves, have made their life a hell, and have chosen this, then laying aside the physical body changes this not, for life will still be hell. The manner in which this is accomplished is a simple one, and it is best to understand different functions or levels of functions of aspects of the mind. You have that of the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the super-subconscious mind. In essence, they could be described as this. The conscious mind is the small I am. The subconscious is that of the soul mind, which has many functions. First of all, the soul mind contains a record of all that has been for that particular soul. The soul contains all memories. The soul is the seat of emotion, or the remembrance of that of the same. But also the soul is responsible on the low levels for the functioning of the physical form, for it carries on all the functions of the body perfect that it has inhabited for this span of time. Now, that of super-subconscious is the great I am. This is the essence of spirit itself. Suppose that in the physical dimension ye would have one who would be hateful, who would deal with jealousy or envy or greed or lust or be the hypocrite, or who would be judgmental, or who would be condemning of self, or any other of the multitude of sins that man has fostered upon himself, then you would find that this entity, upon shedding the physical body, has only filled the soul mind, the subconscious mind, with all the records of these thoughts, these experiences. And this is that is meant. Do ye not look to the deeds of men, but rather look to the thought of men. For there are many deeds that are committed that appear to be loving and kind and generous, but are only expressions of extreme and excessive selfishness. That is held in the conscious mind and fed to that of the subconscious or the soul mind is that is the permanent record of the entity. And this is the choice that God would give thee. For God looks not upon that would flow from the mouth, but rather that is as up to the thought of the entity. For that happens at physical death is the conscious mind, the small I am, the personality, which is a shadow of the soul, is laid aside. Now this is formed almost as a shell in the ether. Then that of the subconscious or the soul mind becomes the conscious mind. That of the super-subconscious then becomes the subconscious mind. Now ye can see that if in this interim of these lives in the physical ye have fed the soul with the sinful aspects of thinking, then doesn't it stand to reason that once the physical body is laid aside, the conscious is laid aside, and then ye have that of a conscious mind that is filled with what? A continuation of that ye have lived. Sinful thinking. What is necessary for this entity? This entity is in a state of hell or purgatory. Condemned by God? nay, condemned by self, if there would be condemnation. It is simply a clear case of each entity reaping exactly that they have sown. Are they cast aside? Nay, none are cast aside except by their own choice. How long would each entity stay in this state of purgatory? Depends upon what that entity has thought about. For there might be some that would stay in this state as man counts time for 1,000 years or so. And some might only stay a matter of moments. But suppose that there are other dimensions, and there are other dimensions for learning. For life is a continual evolvement. What is it ye must learn? The same thing that ye separated thyself from in the beginning. Ye must learn love. There is no other law. All other aspects are aspects of man's wishful thinking to avoid the truth that there is only one law, and that is the law of love. Suppose this person has filled its life with love and touches upon those things that are godlike. Then this crossing over would be a relatively easy, a relatively simple one. Then what would happen? The entity would see, as ye see, many helping hands extended towards it. And who would be these helping hands? Most often they would be those that have preceded thee in physical death. Many times they would be those that did not enter the physical at this time. And ye must understand that when ye enter these levels of consciousness, that ye have earned for further learning, know ye that they build houses, they play baseball, they talk with one another there just as ye do here, but it is simply of a higher vibration. But if ye would be even more enlightened, then what would ye do? Then ye would find that there is a supreme feeling of love as ye belong, for one would merge into that of another, and this is yet another dimension. Then that is known in the earth as of the sexual aspects of male and female is laid aside, and it is only a state of being. Being what? Being loving, being kind, recognizing the individuality yet of each entity, but the merging, almost as a floating through. It is like one film of gossamer floating through another film of gossamer. And what is felt? Very little is felt, for what is that of love. If these entities would travel even further, then they would go perhaps to what man might call Septimus, or Arcturus, or other dimensions where there would be further learning, further opportunities. Death is an individual thing. Death is a personal experience for all, and for those that would take their own life, they would lead a lifetime of hell. For theirs would be extreme confusion if they chose to seek out the rosy-cheeked cherub because they were cowardly and refused to face and meet the opportunities in that of the flesh. And know ye this, those sins that are made in the flesh, those rewards that are made in the flesh, must be met in the flesh, for they can be met in no other. This dimension, that ye call earth, offers thee more opportunities for evolvement of the soul than any other dimension. See?
Does an entity, in any sense, ever die?
Unless they choose it themselves, never. But an entity can choose not to exist, and that entity loses complete awareness of its existence, but not because God has cast it aside, but because the entity has chosen to be aside. See?
Is that what is known as a sort of banishment that is imposed on self?
Self banishes self. God would never, for God would never banish any. God would regard the most vile murderer as nothing more than an extension of love that has been misguided. See?
Why does death exist?
Because of in the beginning, when the souls did enter the physical body to experience sensation, and they lost awareness from that from whence they had cometh. Now understand ye that as these souls did enter these fleshly bodies, life was continuing to evolve here. In fact, several different forms of life were evolving. Certain beasties, certain birds, certain insects, certain fishes, and certain man-like creatures. Then the souls did enter and created what would be known as the 5 races in 5 different portions of the world. Now they did so with awareness, but gradually lost awareness. Now, that of birth is actuality a death for the soul to enter the physical form, and the process must be reversed. Therefore, the physical body must perish, must die. In regards to the physical body, and as to when it must perish or die, is in direct proportion to that is a record of the soul. For while it is understood or not, or accepted or not, all physical illness is the end result of sin. That one who would sin more would be ill more. That one who would be ill more would simply die physically quicker. Now you must understand that if the enlightened soul, the truly enlightened soul, would enter a physical form, it could sustain life in that physical form forever. Not for a little while, but forever. For that entity would need no form of food as ye know it, would need not even a drop of water as ye know it, and that body would radiate perfect health forever. However, there are few enlightened souls. There are those that are developing, and there are those that are seeking, and those that seeketh will find it. They that asketh will receive. They must ever yearn upward. Know ye that as the mind is filled with sin, it brings forth physical stresses. The average span of life for man should roughly be between 120 to 140 years as ye count time. There are those who would decry Methuselah, Methuselah, of that of the good book, for he did live 900 years. But know ye, at the time of Methuselah, time was not reckoned as it is now. For then 10 years would be reckoned as it is now reckoned 1 year. For Methuselah actually lived unto the 90th year. Really not bad for man, for not many make it to this point in time. And those that do make it to that point in time, whether it is believed or not, or accepted or not, are those who are more in harmony with the spiritual aspect of love of God. They are those that would use their creative powers, the forces of the mind that are a link to the Godhead itself, in a constructive fashion rather than a destructive fashion. They take not time to speak of condemnation of self or any other. They take out time to sin, for they are constantly seeking to create constructively. They are constantly seeking in this manner to emulate that of God. Consequently, their body is subjected to less sinful thinking. Consequently, that physical body has a tendency to live longer. Now, this is not to say that there are not genetic differences in a physical form, for there is no body that is exactly like another body. But know ye that one who is most deserving will usually select a physical form that is more perfect and in harmony with its just due. There are exceptions. There is many a deformed body that has been inhabited by a loving, kind soul. This loving, kind soul would simply accept this handicap, so to speak, in order for it to learn the lessons of the soul more easily and quickly. For it is simply easier to be humble if ye are twisted and deformed of body. It is easier when ye constantly look up to another. For those that are beautiful and graceful of body, it is because they have earned it. But if they maintain the attitude of being perfect unto themselves and do that they do for vain self-glory, rather than for the glorification of their God, then ye may sure that those who have wasted their beauty will turn in to that of the ugly. They will have that is not pleasing to look upon. God's law is exact, yet each would do unto themselves that they would do, for no other would do unto any. For this is not the manner in which the law of God works. But a general rule to thumb, and know ye there are exceptions to any, those that would live the longest are usually those that have committed the lesser amount of sins. See?
Is there anything further you feel would be necessary to say and also helpful to say on the subject of death and life after death?
We would simply say to all, know ye that what ye fill thy mind with is what ye are, is what ye become, and it matters little whether ye are in the physical body or in other dimensions. So be careful of what ye would think, first and foremost, for thoughts are real as anything ye know, and that ye think is what ye are. Think ye thoughts of giving and forgiving. Think ye thoughts of love, for to live a life that learns not to love is simply a life that is wasted. Fear ye not the aspect of death, for there would always be those that would help thee, if ye would but ask. This is experienced in the physical dimension and in other dimensions. This is the promise of God. Not to fear in the aspect of death, for death is birth. See?
Thank you. We have no more questions at this time.
Then please awaken the physical form.
Please remove all negative influences from this entity now.
Done.
Allow the body to become completely relaxed.
It is.
Allow any further healing which may take place to take place now.
That could be accepted has been accepted.
Please awaken now, feeling completely refreshed and relaxed.